Okay. Hello to everyone. Good to see you here. And tonight our lecture is going to be on just mind, a continuation of what we've been doing, going through some of the Chan masters. We had started way back when, I don't remember whether it was in the dead of summer, with Bodhidharma and moving our way through the patriarchs, and then to spending a lot of time with Master Hongren and Huining, and so we're working through some of the Chan masters, and we found that there was a manner in which they practiced, and that was that they had a question and answer, and they also had after that stories about them. But I'm remiss in one thing, and that's that. Let us start with a bow in the four great vows. Bow. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless vexations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. You can't say the vows enough during the day. They're very, very powerful. And even if I forget when I start, I still want to go back and say them, because they're that important in terms of setting our compass to the practice. Now, going back to the lecture, where we were at is that there were questions that were asked of to the masters, and then there were situations in which there were stories talked about the masters. For instance, Matsu and Baizong and the ducks. Those are stories that have a meaning to them. And then around that same time, they began to write down more treatises and speak directly to practitioners, and realizing that this was something that was important to lay down certain information so that the next generations would have something to practice and to study. They struggle, just like I do, in presenting things that are not within words and phrases. And yet we have to communicate those things, knowing that those words and phrases, those concepts, can create a trap and a danger to the people who are following that master, so that they begin to reach for some kind of an ideal, some ideal perfect being, kind of along the lines of Confucianism, or they're wanting some kind of immortality like Taoism. But it isn't in this way. And the reason that Chan survived in China was that it distinguished itself from those two indigenous philosophies in a way in which it allowed all to have this idea of salvation, but an idea of salvation saying that you have it now, that there is this mind, which was what has been practiced and passed down from Bodhidharma all the way through. And I kind of start with Bodhidharma, although historically there were people before him that came that were also presenting this kind of a Dharma, but we use it in terms of a point of reference as to when this information of ekayana, this mind, just mind, began to pour into China, and an understanding that these concepts had already been discussed and debated for perhaps a few hundred years in India before they actually reached the borders of China. But in that they kind of underwent this fire and this trial by fire, that enabled them to harden and tempered it like a tempered steel, that when it came to China, it was a completed product, a product that was before was in the workings where people were recording what the Buddha had taught, understanding that it wasn't contemporaneous recording. It was a passed on by words for a few generations before it actually began to become recorded. But there was that process of compilation of the Buddha's teachings and the interpretation of those Buddhist teachings, in which many people studied it, and they studied it and they saw it in their own way. Just as when I read a sutra or a treatise, I see it in my way, in my understanding, in my ability. I don't see it as that is the perfect understanding of it, but I use my heart and sincerity to try to glean whatever I can from whatever the teachings are, so that I can present them to others that might benefit from them. But it is something that we use our own realizations, our own experiences, our own study in order for us to be able to present it in this way. We should not be so foolish as to think that we have it or that we can interpret it without this kind of a background. We do need a background, whether we're presenting the Dharma or translating the Dharma or whatever. We need to have a strong background in the Dharma so that we can practice in the proper way and show people how to practice in the proper way. So when we present this, it's very, very important. How do we present this material so that people will not get lost? And this is why I created the Mindwork Forum. And if you've been on it this weekend, you will see many instances where I'm asking the people, who is writing this? Who is asking this question? What about this? And people who say, oh, I've got this. And then I say, really? And then ask a question, because it is this constant probing that is the practice. And you can see some people who may have started later than others, just simply leapfrogging over others because of their sincerity of exploring and then deciding that they want to really, really do this. No, there were some people that I talked to from the East Coast, and it was very interesting because I noticed, wow, you guys really are doing really well. How did you go from this level to boom, way up? And they just said that they decided to meet on a weekly basis and study and study sincerely, and it clearly paid off, because their understanding, I hesitate to use the word understanding, but their approach to the Dharma was sincere and correct. And it really gives me a great satisfaction when I see that, because that is the intention of me speaking and writing, is to bring more people to the Dharma and bring people to right view. This is what the ancients were doing. Everything that they do is an exhortation for you to practice. It is an invitation for you to practice. Sometimes they're begging you to practice, in terms of it, but that's just the way we are, because as presenters of the Dharma, we presently hold the flag. And it's one of those where, as if we were in, let's say, a relay race, we want to make sure that we run as fast and as hard as we can and practice as hard as we can. So when we hand the baton off to the next generation, that there's something to hand off, rather than questions and incomplete practice and and just a devotional practice rather than going really to the heart of mind and practicing. I'm not saying anything wrong about devotional practice because I do it myself, but it has to be a balance with a sincere study of right view. And it is this that on Monday nights I present to you is in this sincerity, or on when I'm on the mind work forum and just constantly correcting people or moving them just slightly. Sometimes it's just a slight nudge to get the people to to be there. The hardest part is letting go of the ego, letting go of what we sense this consciousness to be the Buddha mind. And it's difficult for us to separate out from that, because the trick is that we have to separate out from it but still retain the substance of mind, and knowing that that is also the substance of mind. But as we separate out from it, what we're separating from is the clinging to the idea that this consciousness is the Buddha mind. It's not easy to do. It's certainly not easy to present. If the ancient masters had a lock on it, simply by reading what they wrote, you would become enlightened. But it isn't in this way. We, each generation, can only repeat in their own way, in their own jargon, in what is communicated with in whatever culture they find themselves in, this truth. And it's an interesting truth because it's a truth without a falseness to it. Not easy to realize that. I can't even say understand it. It has to be realized that there is this truth there, that when there's a realization, one sees that there's not an opposite, which is a falsity to it, because everything is mine. It's why they talk about neither sacred nor profane, because everything is included in mind. It's difficult for us to understand that because we try to see the machinations of mind based on the way that we think and process information in this linear way, in this way of right and wrong. But then when you hear that something like that, the Buddhas used the vexations of sentient beings to practice, then one can become quickly confused as to the import or the meaning of a phrase like that, because it's not easy. What does that mean? The only thing we can do is just look at it and look at it and look at it and contemplate it to see if we can break through it. Sometimes when the time is right, I've said that to some people, and they've instantly got it. They instantly realized it. It made such clear sense to them because in their practice, they were so earnest that all of a sudden something like that was something where they'd say, of course it's that way. But others would look and scratch their head and go, what do you mean a course? I can't see any course at all in this, much less a path in this. What do you mean, of course? I don't see it. You just have to have patience. You have to take your time with this. It will come, but it comes to those who work it. It's like somebody who's in a mine, and just simply going into the mine every day and sitting there will not produce the ore. One has to actively dig to produce the ore that will ultimately produce the gold that one is seeking. We have to work it. We can't just sit there and do nothing. So there is this process, which is the practice. It is what is the ancients have passed on to us, and it works. It really works. And what was something very interesting when I was practicing qigong, and there was I was practicing with this one qigong master that was a Buddhist, and there was a saying, and I don't remember all of the saying in Chinese, but it was very, very profound. But part of it went that what appears to be real is not real, and what appears to be not real is real. I'm always talking to you about the dream, but the part that you do not know that is real, that appears to be unreal, is the magnificent mind, the potentiality, the power of the mind, the vastness, the infiniteness of it is something that to us, because we try to create conceptions of what this is, it's useless. It won't work. But if we really try hard to practice, it will come to us by naturally, it will come to us by its own nature, because once we begin to settle down, we begin to break down the obstructions that appear in the mind. Mind has always been there. It will appear. It's like you were there and you were in this cabin, and every day you would wipe this window that was filled with a lot of dirt, and you would wipe it, and then one day you realize, I never knew there was a mountain that was there, such a great mountain. I never saw it. I had no idea it was there. Because of your effort to clean the window, you're able to see outside. The difficult part for us, and I wrote a little bit about this on the Mind Forum, Mind Work Forum today, is that we don't understand how infinitesimally small we are with the idea of consciousness, and how small in comparison to the vastness of mind we are. And yet we desire to try to hold mind in our consciousness, which we cannot do. But it is easy for the consciousness to fit into mind because of the unlimited space it has. It's like if you tried to fit mind in and you were a computer and your consciousness was the operating system, you would crash instantly, because the information held by the mind is too much for your little computer to handle. It would just blow it up. It could not hold it. But on the other hand, our samsaric existence would not even register even a little thousandths, millionths of a percent of memory in mind, because the memory is infinite. So using this kind of a modern day analogy, we begin to kind of get an idea of mind, not in the sense that we can reach out and touch mind. We cannot do that. But we have to see it is something beyond this this world. The Christians began to coin a phrase a while back saying "not of this earth," and saying that God was not of this earth. But to us, what we say is that there's no space between us all. It doesn't matter. One can reach out and touch the opposite side of the universe in a single stroke, or hug a subatomic particle. this is mind. We cannot do that with the corporal body, even though we're made up of subatomic particles. We cannot do that. We don't know how to do that. Just like Master Ling Chi said, ask your liver to teach you the Dharma, ask your lungs to listen to it. It cannot do that. It is a corporal body of impermanence. We don't understand that. But if we look at it, it makes sense. It makes sense when we look at things. You just have to just go, okay, let me start figuring this out. Okay. There's got to be something more than just this body. This body, I can't take it with me, and if I try to take it with me for more than 200 years, nobody would want to be around me because I'd be an abomination. My arms would begin to fall off. Whatever it is, it doesn't last. But mind does. Mind, because it's unborn. What's the most difficult part for us to understand is that this whole world that we're in is a dream. It's difficult for us to go past that. And it is why in all the sutras, they implore you to do that. And they talk about this Buddha from so many kalpas before to give you an idea of the vastness of mind, to let you know that it is in this way. But yet, there was one sutra that said that a bodhisattva in the snap of his fingers can make 2 kalpas pass. It's amazing. So the time aspect becomes irrelevant in the practice. It is the practice that is relevant, moment to moment to moment. Shifu used to always say that the Buddha is in the present moment. So I'm giving you this preface to what I'm saying, because whatever I'm going to say is going to be the same thing I'm telling you right now. It's just other people may be more eloquent or maybe older or more respectful. But nevertheless, it is in this way. If you begin to contemplate mind, it really makes a big difference. We have to awaken to this, but it's not easy, because when we slip into our bed perchance to dream, which we're already dreaming, we feel so comfortable. I can rest my head. I can put down all of my problems. And can you? Or do you take them with you into your sleep? But we see and seek refuge in physical things. Some people seek refuge in alcohol. Some seek it in drugs, in relationships, donuts. I mean, you can find refuge in whatever. The classical one of the person rebuffed is a half gallon of chocolate ice cream. And no, none of those really give us a true respite of things. If we choose the Buddha, we have a chance. It doesn't mean that we're not going to break our leg or get COVID or lose our job or lose a spouse or whatever. It doesn't mean that. It just means that we can handle it. We understand that it belongs to this world, that there's things more nobler for us to be concerned about. We don't throw away this life. We don't throw away our job, unless our job is unwholesome. We continue working, we continue doing things, but we see the difference. We know that this is a dream. It's not easy for us to do that. But yet that's all what the Buddha and what all of the ancient masters talked about, is just that this is a dream. But there is this truth that's there that we call thus or such. It doesn't have an opposite because it incorporates both what we see in this samsaric world as true and false. So even the false is incorporated. How does it do that? Because it's mind. Where else would it do it? It's not going to purge the mind from all of these thoughts in that way. It just sees through them. It sees that they are phantoms and gives them their due attention in a proper way, in the way of mind, not in the way of a samsaric sentient being. So this is how we approach things. And so now I've spent a lot of time talking to you about this, but I think it's important because for you to know where we're going with all of this is something that is important. So we'll start today with Master Yung Chia's song of Realizing the Way. And the first part goes, the real nature of ignorance is Buddha nature itself. The real nature of ignorance is Buddha nature itself. Right from the very beginning, they slap you and go, do you understand this? And you're going, no, you don't. You don't. You don't understand it, but you should. You should. But it's not easy. But it is the truth. The real nature of ignorance, the real nature here is the true nature of ignorance, is the Buddha nature itself. This ignorance, where do you think it comes from? If it comes from an illusory self, we don't call it an illusory self for no reason, is because it's not real. The self is not real. It is mind manufacturing this dream of ignorance, of obscurations that truly are not there. Mind just is stuck in this dream of this ignorance. But the dream, the substance of the dream, is the mind itself. When we begin to look at things in this way, then we begin to see things in a way in which makes sense. It's not going to come like right away. It may, but it is the way that we approach things. And that's why Master Yung Chia said, okay, if you understand this, you don't have to read anything more. So if you all understand this, I don't have to go to the next line, right? Or should I go to the next line? Better go to the next line, right? Okay, let's go to the next line. The empty illusory body is the very body of the Dharma. So the empty illusory body is the very body of the Dharma. So this empty illusory body, the idea of the self, is the body of the Dharma. Didn't we talk about that last week with the Trikaya, the Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya, and come on, brain, Nirmana, and oh, my brain.
Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya.
Nirmanakaya. I think I said them, but maybe I didn't. Okay, but in any case, those are all reflected in the mind of the sentient beings. We just don't understand that. There is no illusory mind that's outside of mind itself. When the Dharmakaya, or excuse me, when the Dharma body is realized, there's nothing at all. So when this Dharma body is realized, meaning when the Dharmakaya is realized, it is when the mind looks at everything around through its perception, it realizes everything is empty. That is the message of the Heart Sutra. He perceived that all five skandha are empty: form, sensation, perception, volition, consciousness. And consciousness. The thing is it would have been better if they started with consciousness, because by the time you get through the others, then you forget about consciousness. But the consciousness is empty. There's nothing there. There's not a self that's independent of mind. So that's why the Buddha said, not self. Don't look there for it. But we get confused because, as Michael pointed out, one of the comments that were made in the Mind Work Forum was the self nature, and this idea of the self nature. The person was correct and not correct in the way they were using it, but it could have been confusing, because even the illusory body, the illusory idea of a self, is not other than the self nature. And that's why I didn't want to correct that person in the beginning, because they were correct in what they were saying. I don't know if they understood that or not, but then it prompted me to be able to explain further about the self nature of mind. It's all inclusive. That's why it is the truth without a falsity, because it includes what we believe to be a falsity, but it is just simply the mind functioning perfectly in accordance with causes and conditions. Some people may say, this is too deep, Gilbert, for you to teach people. But it isn't, because if you were all trapped in the mind, and I would lead you to a portion of the mind that had a Disneyland in it, would you want to go there? Or would I say, actually, this Disneyland's not going to last. It'll last as long as the air we have, but there's a way out. Should I just let you play in the Disneyland or the House of Horrors, depending on whatever's happening in your life? Or should I lead you out? What do you say? Which is the greater compassion? So to give you opportunity to be able to do this is very precious. And for you to listen to it and to make it yours in terms of this is extremely precious. We can't waste time. The original nature of all things is innately Buddha. So the original nature of all things are phenomenal. Anything that's a thing is phenomenal. If it moves, it's phenomenal. So the original nature of it is innately, meaning intrinsically, the Buddha mind. So the ancients always use this word innately or intrinsically to say that this is the nature of the mind. It's always been, since there was, well, we can't even talk about time, because mind is mind. Time is irrelevant in that regard. It's always been this way. Elements of the self come and go like clouds without purpose. So elements of, and they're not talking about self nature here, they're talking about the illusory self. And what are the elements of the self? This is an easy one. Somebody's got it. What are the elements of the self?
The five skandhas.
The five skandha: form, sensation, perception, volition, and consciousness. All of those are like clouds, and they don't have a purpose. They don't really have a purpose. If you have a dream, maybe the dream, if the dream is scary enough, it wakes you up because you have to pee at night. I guess you could say it has a purpose. But other than that, it doesn't really have a purpose. You could go to work all night long and then ask for a paycheck at the in the morning, and you will not get one, right? But yet you're thinking about it all the time, working overtime at nighttime, thinking about this project and that project or whatever you're doing. But it doesn't have a purpose. When you go, wait a minute, wait, you're talking about me, you're talking about my life, and I've spent all of these years here, and you're saying I don't have a purpose. What is your purpose? What is your purpose here? Is it some idealistic thing, or is there something of value when your mouth moves up and down, when your hands work? Is there something there that is there? And I don't mean to say that you all have to shave your head and become monastic. I'm just saying that we have to look beyond just this samsaric world and all of the so-called goals that we set to find this true purpose. And that's what they're saying is that woe's the person that doesn't understand the true purpose of this life. So you need to think about, what is my purpose here? No. Is it to go to the casino and try to win the big jackpot and win the flashy car with the flashy lights on it? Or is it something else, to see how many grandchildren you can have? In that case, you're way ahead of me. But what is our purpose? What do we leave? Greed, hate, and delusion appear and disappear like ocean foam. When you reach the heart of reality, you find neither self nor other. Very interesting. He is quite eloquent here. So he's saying the greed, hatred, and ignorance appear and disappear like ocean foam. It comes and goes and comes and goes, just along with your bodies. But when you reach the heart of reality, you don't find a self nor other. So what is the other that they're referring to here? So I'll fill in part of the thing for you. You don't find the self, just like the five skandha, the consciousness is empty. So what's the other? Nobody? Take a wild guess. At least take a guess. Let me know. I need proof of life of you guys to see. You may be just like putting up a continuous loop. Nobody know what the other is? Yes, Tori, look, she's so brave. Go. Okay, Pusa, go ahead.
Could you raise your hand so that you pop up at the top?
That little yellow hand. No, she's trying to, there you go.
Yeah,
Okay,
if I keep my hand raised, it'll eventually trigger that. But anyway, yeah, I just want to take a guess what the other is. My guess is the individual sense of self, that there's a distinction, that there's a you, there's a I. That's my guess.
okay. Anybody else? I'll give her a participation trophy on that one. Nobody else? Yes, Mark.
Anything you perceive separate of the ego.
And what would that be?
Could be anything.
Okay. Anybody else? Michael?
It could be phenomena.
Well, wouldn't that be parts when we talk about that we find neither self nor other, is that self is phenomena. So the other is looking for a higher self or the Buddha. And so there's some commentaries that say if you happen to find walking and you encounter the Buddha on your path, you should kill the Buddha.
Mm.
And the reason being is that the Buddha cannot be known in this way. That's why the Diamond Sutra was talking about not to be known by the 32 marks. So if you're trying to encounter something other, it's interesting because what it does is that it leads you back to mind itself, not consciousness, but to mind. So we do not create an other, some higher self or some Buddha along the way. We have this idea of that just this mind is the Buddha mind. And so there's no place where we have to go to seek it outside of the self. The self is perfectly where it's at in accordance with causes and conditions. But it is just in this way. Okay, we continue on. There was a question? No? Okay. So if we don't see, so the heart of reality, if you neither see self nor others, you don't see Buddha, then at that point, it says even the worst kind of karma dissolves at once. Dust builds up on the mind mirror, not clean. This was the Sheng approach of constantly wiping the mirror bright. You constantly wiping it, so no dust to light. And so he said, with one decisive stroke, now lay the glass bare. So it's almost like saying now the lessons of Huining and Subitism, the sudden enlightenment, shatters that mirror. It shatters your concept of in the mind of what you believe to be a mirror. And it shatters it so that one's mind penetrates deep into mind. This is called self-absorption. Okay. Who is it that has no thought? And this is what I've been telling the group in mind work. Who is it that has no thought? Who is that has no thought? What is that? It's just mind, but it's not your mind. It's the Buddha mind that you all use. And when you see that in the correct way, there's no place that no sentient being that doesn't have the Buddha mind. You all have it. It's intrinsic within you. But we get confused and we call it consciousness. And as a result of calling it consciousness, it loses its purpose. Then its purpose is a purpose of some samsaric purpose, not a pure Buddha mind purpose. So it says, who is it that has no thought? Who is it that is unborn? It's as if really not born, yet not unborn either. So it gives you nothing to hold on to. Well, if it's not born, then I'm unborn. No, he's saying it's not really that either. What? You can't hold on to that. going straight to the root is the hallmark of the Buddha. So this is when he's talking about going straight to the root. In Sanskrit, that term is mula. You'll see mula before many, as a preface before many words in Sanskrit, but it refers to the root. And the root is mind itself. And so he's saying that the hallmark of the Buddha is going straight through the root, the mind perceiving mind. Picking up leaves and collecting branches is no use at all. There was an ancient text where it was talking about this and talking about how the mind is the root, and that we should not try to find the answer in the roots or the branches, because that's phenomenal. The cause of whatever is out there can be found in the root. Without the root, the branches and the leaves don't exist. It is fundamental. And it's also pointing to, when it says that collecting branches and leaves is no use at all, it's pointing directly to right view and saying one does not polish the tile to make it a diamond. It's no use to try to polish up samsara. The mind naturally functions in a perfect way in accordance with the 37 factors of enlightenment, Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, the 4 noble truths. All of those things are incorporated in the practice of right view. But it is not something that we are collecting these branches and leaves to do it. It is just the practice. It's just the practice. We don't try to keep gathering up things in a sense of trying to accumulate some kind of merit, like Emperor Wu did when Damo asked him what merit did he get for putting up all these stupas and helping all of these monks, and he said none whatsoever. Why? Because it's samsaric. So it is a way of looking at it. It doesn't mean we say, well, what the heck is it good for? You know, I shouldn't give any money to the monks, or I shouldn't do this, or I shouldn't do that. It's not in that way. Those things happen naturally in accordance with cause and conditions. When one has realizations, they realize that this is important stuff. This is valuable stuff. It is an antidote for the suffering of this world. And it's something that is a worthy purpose in this life. Most people don't know the pearl that answers all the wishes, the great pearl found in the treasure house of the Tathagata Garbha. Again, this is going back to the Sintamani pearl, or the Mani pearl, and this pearl is one which fulfills all your wishes. Its miraculous workings are neither empty nor not empty. A single spear of light without form, and yet not formless. So very interesting, because it speaks in a way without duality. So when we talk about this, because what is being reflected here is the 2 truths. And so in the 2 truths, what happens is we have apparent reality and absolute reality. Apparent reality, you could say in some ways, is a subset of absolute reality. But that is made of the substance of mind. So we cannot discount it and say that the wheat, we only seek the wheat, we don't seek the chaff. The chaff comes along with it. The mere mind shines brightly without obstruction. Its light reaching worlds as countless as the sands of the Ganges. So if we were to say that a world's, if you had each grain of sand was the Ganges River, then no, each grain of sand was a world. That would be great. But yet this light can reach all of those places because it is the very light which constructed those places. It is the primal force that everything comes into an appearance. So it's extremely powerful to be able to do that. We don't understand. It's not possible for us to realize how powerful that is. "10,000 things are all reflected here, illumined perfectly, neither inside nor outside." Again, no duality here. What's happening is that it's saying that all of these things, 10,000 things can appear at one time. In fact, there's actually more than 10,000 appearing at one time in the mind. And even in your present moment consciousness, as beyond this consciousness of being able to process all of this information. But it's not inside nor outside. It's not processing from inside your brain. The mind as a sense organ. So if you're using the mind as a sense organ, it can only perceive from the sense organs. So there's a duality there of subject and object. And so there is an obstruction when we do that. The mind as a sense organ takes all things as objects. How should they be seen if not as objects? Anyone? You guys must be very tired today. Yes, Eon, a late vote from Ohio, of course. Go ahead.
They should all be seen as just mind.
Just mind. It's just mind. So when it's seen properly, it is just mind. And so he's coming up with a big bang closing for you here. And so, but he says that the mind as a sense organ, okay, so this is limiting it, then takes all things as objects. A double blotch, B-L-O-T-H. A blotch is like an ink blotch. If you put on a paper, you know, you cannot see the white underneath the paper, underneath the blotch. If you make a double blotch, then it's even worse. So he's saying a double blotch that darkens the mind mirror. So if you were going to take an eyedropper and took some India ink and dropped a drop of it onto the mirror, you would not be able to see the reflective properties of the mirror underneath. Even though they still are there, we would not be able to see that. And if we dropped another drop of this Indian ink onto that mirror, it would be a double blotch. The first blotch is the phenomena itself that is posing as mind. The second blotch is the phenomena posing as a self, or the self nature of mind, which is not the self nature of mind. It's a trick. and it's a double blotch. We don't see that. We are constantly trying to erase the single blotch by using the other blotch to do that. So that we go, oh, how does that work? It looks much, much better now. Mind looks at it and says, I still can't see because you're in the way. What do you mean I'm in the way? The self is in the way. But that self is so clever, it makes it look like it is the one that is cleaning up the blotch. That's why they were saying that, you know, be careful how you practice, you know, because if you're trying to get rid of all this dust on the mirror, you know, it isn't going to work that way. You have to see through the mirror itself, or through all of that. And then it says, but the moment it's wiped clean, the light shines again, mind and things both forgotten. True nature comes clear. So what happens is that when we use right view, this is the manner in which we clean the mirror, because the right view just simply says, originally, none of this stuff is there. It's just a phantom that one can see through. When I say the one is the mind sees through. And so as a result of that, it sees clearly its own nature. We can't see it because we create a false sense of self-nature that's conceptual. And as a result of that, we cannot break through, because we're constantly trying to confirm that we've reached this exalted state of realization. And any kind of an effort on that part will be woefully wrong. This is why we can't practice in this way. We have to practice by just moment to moment seeing everything clearly as it is, and not trying to escape. Where are we going to run to? All we have to do is see, it's all right, you've got a body, okay. We know right from the very beginning that this body is going to be, it has a short shelf life. So we know that. So we have to understand what is it that's there that can help us to understand what this purpose is, and why there are these appearances. Buddhism isn't one where, and I kind of mentioned this in my mind work forum, that it's not easy. It offers you the bitter medicine. And I say to the people on mind work is that I may be your mother, but I'm not a cookie mom. I'm not going to give you cookies, you know, and make you feel good. No, you need a mom that tells you the way it is, of the world, and that's what's important. So when you look at things, you have to see them in this way. But it scares people. People don't want to know that. They want to feel comfortable. They want the Buddha to wrap their arms around them, or Kuan Yin to anoint them on the head and do that. It's okay, Kuan Yin, you already have that. Just put your arms around yourself and you'll feel better. You'll understand that this very mind that you have, it has all of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas from the past, present, and future all together. We don't seek from outside or from inside. That's what Master Yongchia was saying. Don't try to look at it this way. See it as a totality. When you see it as a totality, then there is no dualistic thinking whatsoever. There is no real polishing the mirror. There's just simply mind. And that's what's important. When we think in this way, it works. When we don't think in this way, then then we suffer, and no, we don't get it right. So hopefully this will give you encouragement. And I ask you, pick up any Dharma book, any treatise, any sutra, and I will guarantee you what I'm talking to you about tonight, you will find it in there. You'll be so surprised that it's there. You can just pick up a book and you'll read it and you'll go, wow, there it is right there. It's not a secret in that way. So hopefully that will help you. So that's your lesson for today. It's just this mind. Okay. Amitabha. So questions. Yes. There she is. Go ahead. Wait. There you go.
So I've been thinking about this question on and off for a little bit. I kind of have my answer, but just want to verify with you if that's true or not. Earlier you talked about this, there's no self and other, and that means there's no external Buddha. And the practice of, when a person's in samadhi, you see the demon, you kill a demon, and then you see Buddha, you kill Buddha, right? So that's the idea. So I don't know if that's like a conflict with the Pure Land, is that if I die today, okay, Amitabha appears, and do I reject Amitabha? So my own answer is that instead of seeing that's like the external Buddha, that's my Buddha nature, and there's no difference. It's just mind. It's all mind. So does that still work for Pure Land? I guess it does. I don't know. I kind of want to hear your take on that.
Your question is a good question, and your questions are very innocent, and they should be, and they're questions that I've gone through as I progressed in the practice as well. It's natural for you to have these kinds of questions. When I look at the Pure Land, I see it in a way of the potentiality in two parts. One is the part of self-realization, which is a great emphasis in Pure Land practice in the beginning, but in a more profound aspect of the Pure Land practice, it's no longer trying to get to the Pure Land, but it's trying to create a Pure Land wherever you're at. And it is in this aspect where one looks at, and it isn't my mind or my practice or whatever. It is just simply when the mind is realized, it doesn't present things from the idea of my mind. It presents it from the idea of mind, and it perceives the world from the mind. When it does that, then irregardless of where it's at, it is a Pure Land, because it sees through the illusions. It sees through this to see that all of these appearances are momentary flashes, like in a summer cloud or a morning star, a dewdrop on a leaf. They're just temporary. But the mind that one is using, it is unborn, it's uncreated. It is something that to you is a Pure Land, and you see through all of these illusions. Then you have, as I've been kind of using as a refrain, what is the function of this body, this seeming lifetime, is to help others to awaken to this. So it's not just enough where we say, okay, I made it to the Pure Land. you know, and then you know, practice there and hope to come back to do that. But the higher purpose, the higher function is, even while you're here, you still can do something. You still can make a difference to create a Pure Land here. So we do not think about the Pure Land as some place, the Western Pure Land, where we go, you know, and we practice in this way. Of course, you can go to the Western Pure Land, but this Pure Land also is one where it's immediate to where you're at. And it's reachable by simply not reaching for anything else, by understanding that all of this world is mind and that it appears in mind. And we're clear about that. And so it helps us deal with all the adversities. And believe me, I have many adversities that befall me every day. I'm an attorney, and there's always problems. There's always things that are happening. There's always situations, you know, that happen. And so it's not like, oh, you know, he's so great that nothing harms him. No, there's things that happen all the time. If I didn't have my practice, I'd go crazy or find myself at the bottom of a bottle. But rather, we just create a Pure Land for people to get close. Those people that are floundering, trying to hold on to the sea foam, when they hear the Dharma and they hear a genuine Dharma, or they hear somebody with compassion and they care, they find solace, they find protection there. Even if they're Christians, Muslims, Jews, it doesn't matter. They find some solace, some comfort around you. And that's the Pure Land. So we should not just simply try to create this idea of a Pure Land where we need to go to. We should try to convert the environment around us to the Pure Land. And then you'll be closer to the Pure Land. You'll be, if you really want to go there, you're guaranteed a spot. Okay.
Thank you so much, Gilbert. That's so beautiful. Thank you.
Vadim, there you are. Where did?
Ah, okay, works. Gilbert, the thing I'm not getting is how is this mind different from consciousness? The teaching is saying that this mind is the Buddha, but all we know right now in this moment is consciousness, right? All I know is consciousness. How is this consciousness different from this mind? Because this mind is the Buddha, but this consciousness is not. I can't see the difference between this mind and consciousness.
And this is where you should emphasize your practice on. If you can make this realization, everything else will fall into place for you. It is something that I cannot present to you in words that will do that. You just have to keep looking at it. You have to keep reading. So when you see what the masters say, what the Buddha said about these subjects, then you know, okay, they're all talking about the same thing. So there must be something to this. And so then you begin to have faith in the Buddha's, faith in the teacher's, faith in the Dharma, and faith in yourself that you can break through. The idea is difficult because it's kind of like the one where it's like, I think, therefore I am. So you're self-proving. And so you self-prove yourself and say, I have this consciousness. But it is the reason why Madhyamika school and Nagarjuna was so important, because of the fact that it looked at things and it saw the absurdity of trying to verify ourselves when we're impermanent, and that we understand there's a refutation of self that you might want to explore the Madhyamika school and Nagarjuna, and there's a see if I have it here or not. Not readily accept. Oh, here it is. The fundamental wisdom of the middle way is a nice place to start, and look at this book here, and if somebody has a like a thing you can see what it is, but it's a good book, and it discusses I'll take a shot at it. Mula Madhyanma Karika. Now, Santa, you can say it.
Mula Madhyamaka Karika.
You see, I said it fairly close. I get 78 for that. But remember what I said about mula, right? What was mula mean? Is the root. So this is the root of the practice. And so that's a good book for you to start with, to try to do that, because there's a refutation of all things that are in there, whether it's time, space, self, everything. Oh, there we go. So in any way, that's something that I would strongly suggest that you do, that will help you break down the idea of this consciousness as being you. Because as you begin to do that, and what Nagarjuna did is, as I mentioned before, is he used the philosophical attack of reductio ad absurdum, meaning that he takes you out to your most illogical position to defend based on your argument, and then you cannot defend that argument because it doesn't make sense. And so, I mean, it's pretty easy at that point, because if you're saying that you exist in your consciousness, you have to be ready to defend that that's real. But if your consciousness is constantly changing, you can't even make up your mind whether you want chocolate or vanilla ice cream, then it's an undefendable position. And so this kind of an empirical logic that's used by Nagarjuna is very, very helpful to breaking down the obstructions that you have with this. It's natural for you to have it, and I'm very happy that you bring that up, because it's something very important that you have to kind of go through this process of examining the mind and looking at what consciousness is. And it goes to the very attack of the Mahayana with the Heart Sutra, saying that everything is fundamentally empty, and that the consciousness is empty. And so we begin to see the idea of emptiness as different than being something that is non-existent. It exists and doesn't exist. So Nagarjuna never said that consciousness doesn't exist. It only exists within mind itself, but it is not independent of mind. If it was independent of mind, it would have to have a source, a birth, and whatever, and then you'd have to build your constructs around that. No, some people use the easy way and create a deity to say the deity created them. And so then we get to the obvious question after that, is then who created the deity? And so you know, you have to use your skill set, and you're a very, very intelligent person, but use your intelligence in a very aggressive way towards these questions, okay? And it will help you. And then if it still doesn't help you, then, you know, come on back, you know, and we'll keep working on it. It will take time, but your question is a legitimate question, you know, because it's something that again, it's kind of the idea of self-proving, you know, that because I have consciousness, I exist. And just if you read through the sutras, you'll see a refutation of it everywhere. Okay.
Thank you, Gilbert.
Oh, you're welcome. That was a good question. Okay.
Hi, Gilbert. Thank you so much for today's lecture. Along Vadim's question on consciousness, I was recently brought by my friend to this bhakti yoga, and it kind of surprised me as to what they're teaching. Basically, it is talking a lot about awakening the soul. And because I've been so brainwashed by you about mind work, I'm trying to understand the relationship between the mind and the soul. Yeah. How does one affect the other? And because you said that the mind is the patriarch of the past, the present, and the future, does this mind follow the same soul? Basically the relationship between the two. And about awakening the soul, is this something which will come naturally if we focus on the mind in terms of how we practice? Thank you so much.
This is more of a Hindu orientation. And again, it's kind of like what one would say of the idea of Confucianism and the perfect person, and trying to reach that perfect person that's there. I don't know whether I would use the word brainwash, but I imagine, you can use water to wipe the mirror clean too. I would use Windex, but for a more expeditious way. But in any case, I understand what you're saying, and the thing is that when you run into other religions, and they are very much, how would you say, they have a fervor for their religion that's natural. And so the thing is that you have to understand that they're going to be that way, but it should not defer you from yours. It just should drive you into understanding your religion more. We don't, and your question is an excellent question. I haven't run into this one for quite a long time. But Buddhists do not believe in a transmigration of souls. Okay. We don't have the idea that from that let's say if you die in this lifetime and you are reincarnated, that Lei Hui will appear there, whether she's a man or a woman, but it is exactly you. There is just simply a let's say waves that run through, or you could say a current in an ocean. And if the current is going in a certain way, then when one dies, that current will continue in that direction. And so as a result of that, there'll be an appearance of another body, but that body isn't just, it's not exactly you, and it is something that has a lot of, let's say, the baggage that you have from the previous lifetime. It's kind of interesting. I wish I could remember the whole story about, they were talking about these three sons that were watching their father die, and the father was saying, I'm dying, who will go with me? And to his sons, and the one son says, well, I have a life to live. And the other one said, I have family, I have this. And the other one, by the name of Karma, says, I will go with you. I'll follow you all the time. Wherever you go, I will follow you. Rest assured, I'll be right by your side. And the idea is that it is this karma that appears, but the karma itself only is valid in samsara, only in the dream. With outside the dream, then the karma is non-existent. Only in the dream And if someone is within the samsara, whether they're a human, a ghost, a hell dweller, an animal, ashurlo, or a heaven dweller, they just go up and down that, but there isn't necessarily a life and being that travels that. So there is not a soul, okay, that travels that direction. We see there's certain patterns. We see that people are, when they're reincarnated, they're reincarnated into samsara, but that does not make them real. So you will see things like, for instance, like I have 2 dogs. One of them, I know that she came from the human realm, and because of things she did there, she's now a dog, and she and by the fact that she ate my sugarless wafers today, she probably guaranteed herself another spot in the dog realm. And the other one has been a dog for a while. And so we see these things, but we understand that that is not their nature. Their nature is not to be a dog or to be a ghost or to be a human or whatever. It is just appearances. And there's no soul there. There's no eternal soul. And if there was this eternal soul, then it's difficult for us to explain the causes and conditions in terms of how it flows. Because to have an eternal soul, no, it's something that you're going to run into problems in terms of trying to define exactly where is the soul at? What is this soul? And it's ways that other religions will say, okay, this is their means of establishing salvation by saying that we have a soul. The Buddhist idea of salvation is just this mind as the Buddha mind. It is not the attachment to the temporary appearances within the mind, because that's why they talk about that this is like holding on to seaweed or sea foam and trying to hold on and stay above the ocean. You cannot do that. So we see that as a different way. Other people, they want to believe that they have a soul for salvation. We look at it and say, what soul needs to be salvaged? You're using the Buddha mind now. And so this Buddha mind is already intrinsically yours. We cannot say, oh, it's your birthright. Your birth comes from your clinging and not seeing your Buddha nature as being within you. So when we look at it, we have to see it in this way. It's kind of spooky because it's like going and saying, okay, you need to swim to the other side of the pool, but you have to let loose of the coping on this side to go over to the other side. But you go, well, I feel real comfortable holding on to here. I don't know if I'm going to make it to the other side or not. But you have to have faith to let go. So in the religions that happened before and presently, there is this idea of that you have this soul. So whatever happens, that's the idea of their salvation, is if you die, you're going to come back again and whatever. But this ultimate soul, where will that take you? And if it takes you to heaven, is that permanent or not permanent? And so that's how we look at that. We don't try to take people away from their religion, but you have to understand, and I'm happy that you mentioned this, because so that you can also explain your religion to them, because it's difficult, because especially when we're talking about such profound things, it's not easy to talk to people about Buddhism, because especially profound right view Buddhism, because it requires some effort to study it. But more and more, as you begin to study, you'll see that there is not a soul. The soul would presume that there is an independent person, but that's what the Buddha had first presented with the 12 nidanas, was that the cause of appearances and the fact that there's not an individual soul, there's just these appearances that come up. And so when we see that, it's not the easiest to explain, because it's much easier to say, oh, there's a supreme being, and so you just trust that supreme being and you'll be fine. But having a supreme being over you also brings substantial questions that can make them feel very uncomfortable as well. Okay. So thank you for the question. I hope I helped you. It's a long explanation for a very good question, but I just barely touched the surface of it. So go to it. Stay a Buddhist. Okay. Anyone else? And for those of you who are still Christian, it's okay. Just remember that, you only have one shot at this. So you can still practice well and do well, but you only have one shot. So you better make it your best on this one, because if not, see you. All right. Anybody else? No other questions? All right, then. Okay, we'll finish for the night. Good questions, as usual. I thank you all for listening in and supporting, and keep bringing people. Bring people here and have a chance for them to do this and to spread this precious Dharma. It's not me. It is this Dharma that I'm presenting to you, and so it's there in writing, not something I'm making up. Okay, so take care.